All right. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be reacting to the podcast of Janko with Jordan Peterson. It's been out for a week by now. I'm a little late to the party, had some difficulties with the live stream, so I hope you haven't seen it already. It's a pretty long one, 2.5 hours, but I'm certain this is going to be a really enlightening podcast. Obviously, I think a lot of you already know Jordan Peterson. I've also reacted to his previous Jubilee video. Um, if you got some work to do around the house, why not clean your room while we watch it? But yeah, I hope you haven't seen it yet, and let's watch it together.
I saw your Jubilee video.
Oh, I've got a story about that. I should tell you, just so everybody knows. I haven't told this. God only knows if we're creating an electronic environment that will be fundamentally inhabited by autonomous electronic life forms that have virtually nothing to do with us.
A lot of these OnlyFans women sleeping with 500 men in one night, their parents are on board.
It's an abomination.
It's literally an abomination. When the worst of all possible things is elevated to the highest possible place, you know that destruction is coming.
Why is it that when people ask you if you're a Christian, you don't really answer it?
But what do you think? You're watching?
My perspective is that
I'm just playing, I don't fight, I just pray. I only go the way of mistake.
That's lovely, George. I love it. For a real gift to be around.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a very good question.
I love you guys. You've given me something to think about for a lot of outlets.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the George Janko Show. Today we have an incredible guest. His name is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and we're going to be going over a lot of topics that a lot of people have been curious about. His Jubilee video and appearance, how he feels about where the government's moving, his fear for the future, and his deep, deep beliefs and his processing. Thank you guys for watching. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode with Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Seems to have a very apocalyptic tone by what I've seen so far, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool.
By the way, I've never seen anybody sit so perfect right away. Like usually they adjust, like they got a pillow, they're like fixing the mic. He just sits down in his little cute boots and he's like perfect. He's ready to go. He's just ready to rock.
These aren't cute. They're dangerous. They're dangerous.
Did you start wearing these because you're from Arizona now?
No, I'm from Alberta.
And they have boots there too?
They definitely do. Yes.
Where's Alberta?
It's the province one removed from the coast. So British Columbia is on the coast, then Alberta.
Okay, well, I got to do an intro. But before I do an intro, I owe you an apology.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's very few times I ever watch back an episode and I can't even watch it because I get so uncomfortable. And our last episode was so humiliating. I was so nervous to have an episode with you. I think I like somehow made it like a psychiatrist meeting, like with me and my wife. And I'm like, but it wasn't even about you, and it should have been about you. And I flew all the way there. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to re-interview you on our podcast, because I thought it was a great episode, but I also got so carried away. And I really appreciate you coming back on, and I apologize for that.
No problem.
Okay, amazing.
Seriously, don't give it a second thought.
Oh, okay.
That's what he wants to do after all, right? He wants to help people, so he's not gonna mind that.
Appreciate it. Well, welcome back.
I wasn't carrying around, what would you say, any resentment or irritation.
Good.
You know, podcasts go all sorts of ways, and I mean, you took the risk. It's your podcast, so I never gave it a second thought.
The comments now are like, you should have just left it at that one. It goes back at that. All right, welcome back, guys. I am here with Dr. Jordan Peterson, and if you guys do not know who this man is, he is a man who will make you think and then rethink and then think about what you just rethought. Before I even get started, the one question that I had, because I just been watching you like pretty consistently. I mean, we even on our show promoted.
This is off topic, by the way, but he has a great fucking beard. Look at that density right there.
Just been watching you like pretty consistently. I mean, we even on our show promoted the gospels that you've been promoting, and the schooling that you've kind of mastered and put out to compete with real colleges nowadays. My one question is, do you have problems when it comes to overthinking? Like, do you ever get so caught up in your mind that while you're trying to help these other neighbors of yours, parenting in ways or in ways that could help them in schooling, but do you ever get into your own head? Because the way that I've ever seen myself get anxious or depressed is when I overthink. And I would assume I'm wise, but then my own thoughts kind of like tear myself apart. You being so wise and having a deep thought to every question, do you battle that with yourself as well? Do you sit there and does it ever get exhausting thinking?
Oh, definitely.
What do you do to balance that?
Well, I suppose it was particularly intense when I was younger in graduate school. Like I was thinking nonstop, 16, 17 hours a day at the same rate that Ben Shapiro speaks. And the only thing...
They're laughing, but that's something really painful, actually, if you're going through it.
Two things would shut it off to some degree. Alcohol, which
There we go. See, substance abuse. You need to cope with such a thing. If you have a brilliant mind, or if you're very headstrong, uh, overthinking is the default, especially in the beginning when you're trying to formulate your worldviews and how you think and see the world. So in the beginning, this is really overwhelming, and so yeah, you started drinking.
the only thing, two things would shut it off to some degree. Alcohol, which I enjoyed quite a lot, and weightlifting. But other than that, it was just nonstop.
I think this is why I smoke marijuana, so to kind of turn my brain off from thinking at night, so I could help sleep. That's why I started smoking. How did you? That's a deep hole because now
That's interesting though. When I smoke weed, I don't know what it is for you guys. Like, I mean, I don't smoke weed anymore. I'm clean for over a year by the grace of God, and I'm never going back. But when I used to smoke weed, my thoughts would actually amplify. I would actually think more, and I would think deeper. So it's interesting. It actually has the opposite effect on me. I don't know how, like, I think a lot of you are similarly wired to me, which is why I enjoy my content. So I'm interested what it's like for you guys. In case you've smoked, if you never have, hey, don't start. You don't need it.
I'm always sitting here thinking like, okay, I need marijuana to help me shut my brain off at night because I think too much and I can't. I'll just stare up at the ceiling. But I've been gradually separating myself from it because I know it's not healthy, and I'm trying to substitute it with working out, eating clean, reading
Is
the
that
gospel.
helping?
Tremendously. But there's an effect that alcohol does and marijuana does that is instantaneous. How did you maneuver? It's kind of like a Band-Aid that you're putting over a wound. It's not healing it, but it's a Band-Aid. How did you get over putting the Band-Aid on you when you were drinking? Like, what was your steps of getting away from alcohol?
Well, I noticed. I mean, I came from a rural town, and drinking was the national sport there. And when I went to graduate school, there was a level of professionalism that became increasingly demanded, and it was also the case that if I was suffering the ill consequences of a night out, let's say, that I couldn't work effectively, and my work and my professional conduct became increasingly important to me. And I realized when I was about 26 or so that pretty much the only time that I had regrets about my conduct was in the aftermath of a drinking episode. I had a very active social life, but I just got tired of that. And then when I established a permanent relationship with Tammy, and we also thought about having kids, I thought, well, there's no way I'm not going to be intoxicated around my kids. So it was just, and this is a pretty standard pattern for men.
Yeah. Once the responsibilities increase, you start to move away from your adolescent patterns, hopefully. Not the case for most men, but should be.
And once they adopt responsibility, they tend to straighten out their behavior.
So it's a common thing.
Yeah. Did it help with the chronic high-speed thinking? Not really. I mean, that's a temperamental attribute. I'm very verbally fluent, and so a verbal fluency is a measure of the number of words you can produce in a given amount of time. There's immense individual difference in verbal fluency, and I'm very verbally fluent, and one of the consequences of that is that I think in words all the time. Now, there's huge advantages to that, obviously. That's what allows me to write, and I suppose I also channeled that. I started writing seriously when I was 23, something like that.
So you were still drinking at the time when you were writing?
Yeah.
Did that ever get in the way?
To stop. Yeah, definitely. Well, it particularly got in the way. It got in the way for two reasons. The material that I was dealing with was extremely complex and very emotionally demanding, and so
I mean, it gets in the way of everything. Even if you're trying to cope with your way of thinking or with your wiring, alcohol is just gonna delay the time until you finally figure out how to cope with it. Same goes for his writing or anything else. It's never a benefit.
if I was suffering from the consequences of drinking, which takes 3 days to recover from an episode of drinking. You're in alcohol withdrawal for 3 days. So if you drink twice a week, you are always in alcohol withdrawal, and that heightens anxiety. And so the material I was dealing with was already making me plenty anxious without having any chemical addition. And then I also lost the ability to make fine distinctions, which you need to do if you're editing. So, and I'm a careful editor. I test all the sentences that I put down to see if they're fireproof. And to do that, especially as you progress towards a completed document, you have to be able to make fine judgments. And any impairment interferes with that. And so I would edit for hours and make it worse. Well, that's not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you are compromised, the more compromised what you give to the world becomes, right? This is why you need to rid yourself of alcohol abuse, weed abuse, chronic masturbation, any type of addiction, and need to step into purity so that the gift which you came here on this earth to do and to provide the world with and follow your purpose is going to be untainted and clear, right? You clean yourself so you can share the purity or share the love with the world, help the people, elevate the people, right? That's also a motivation, if you're somewhere out there and you feel like you have a calling, you feel like you have a mission, you need to clean your life first before God can truly use you and you can step into who you need to be and reach a lot of people. Like imagine Jordan Peterson was still smoking and drinking, right? Imagine all the men nowadays who never stop being on dating apps and running after women and pedestalizing them and masturbating. They are all not able to follow their purpose. That's why they all become depressed. And this is also the roads towards hell, fundamentally speaking. So, no matter who you are, you have a purpose, you have a goal. And in order for you to properly follow this mission and this goal and bear that responsibility, you need to first rid yourself of the major sins, of the major corruption, so you can step into being or you can step into who you need to be so you can do what you came here to do. And this is the same for every single man on this planet.
Edit for hours and make it worse. Well, that's not helpful. And so at some point, you have to decide if you're serious about things. And if you're not, then you're not doing anything of sufficient worth. That's the rule. And if you are doing something of sufficient worth, then you let go of the things that interfere with it.
Exactly. You better give it your all, or you're going to regret that a lot because at some point this life's going to be over and you don't want to look back and be like, that's the thing I should have been doing. But I compromised the way I did it, or I didn't truly do it properly because I was drinking, because I was smoking, because I had attachments or addictions or whatever.
I can give you an example of that.
Like this already is actually infinitely profound if you think about it. So this is gonna be a good episode.
People will comment about this, I suspect, because there's a substantial minority of people who get irritated at me for making biblical references, but I've been studying the Bible a lot in recent years. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years or 40 years, I guess, 40 years. And so
And he's still learning. Wanna bet? The Bible is so deep, you can study this your whole life and you will still be learning.
in the story of Cain and Abel, which is like 2 paragraphs long and tells you absolutely everything you need to know about human beings, which is quite the miracle.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's unbelievably condensed. So Cain is bitter.
His sacrifice is no good.
His sacrifices are not appreciated by God. Yeah. And there's an implication in the text that he's not bringing his best to the table.
Can I like, just because we're bringing that up, and it's such a deep and profound part of the Bible.
By the way, he's making a cross reference here to what they just talked about in the beginning. right? Because a lot of people, they get irritated when he randomly starts to bring up scriptures, but no, he's making a cross reference because he's trying to show you the elemental ways of being, right? What I just told you about as well. You either take on responsibility, let go of your corruption so you can become who you need to be, so you can give the world what you came here to give the world, or you stay in resentment, you stay addicted, right? Cain and Abel, the two natures, good and bad, good and evil, God and Satan. He's already getting down to it, which I like.
Just because we're bringing that up, and
Yeah.
it's such a deep and profound part of the Bible. I understand in a way, but I would love to know, why do you think God was displeased with him with his sacrifice?
Well, the implication in the text is that Abel is doing his best,
Yeah.
but that Cain is offering what's second rate. Now, there's
And here's also what's important. And I don't know if he's going to get to that or not, but if you follow the steps of Cain, or if he, Jordan Peterson, would have followed the steps of Cain, you wouldn't be sitting here watching him. You wouldn't be learning from him. He couldn't be used by God to teach you and help you understand things. So just to understand how important this is that you take the right steps and put your life into order, because who knows, maybe you too have a great gift to give. And so if you didn't take these things that when you are young and you know you need to do, when you don't take them serious, when you don't quit the sin, when you don't stop doing what's compromising you, you might miss out on such great gifts you could have been giving to the world, and such a great purpose and meaning you could have been walking in.
best,
Yeah.
but that Cain is offering what's second rate. Now, there's a variety of pieces of evidence of that. One is that Abel offers high quality animal sacrifices. He takes the best cuts of the best animals and offers them to God. So he literally offers his best. And Cain
He offers his best by, in this example, you stop smoking, you stop drinking, you stop doing what corrupts you.
animals and offers them to God. So he literally offers his best. And Cain is offering the detritus of his detritus, I think, of his crops. But also, when Cain complains, God says to him, if you did well, you'd be accepted. And that means something very specific. It means that anything more than the offer of everything is insufficient. Now, Cain, of course, gets bitter about that, but God's offer to him is that if he tried as hard as he could, it would work.
Yeah, he says
Well,
that it's
yeah.
creeping up on him.
If you did well, you would be accepted. And
Same goes for you.
it's a remarkable story because it has the victimizer narrative embedded in it, right? Cain considers himself a victim, and he's victimized by Abel and God, and Abel is a good man and is doing everything he can to put himself and the world together, and he's favored by God for that reason, and Cain destroys his own ideal and suffers in consequence. Well, I came to understand when I was in my 20s that if you were going to attempt something meaningful and responsible and difficult, that you had to make the proper sacrifices. And the sacrifices are the elimination of anything that's interfering. Anything.
Exactly.
All of you. Most of you will go if you do that.
Yep.
Most of you will burn away.
Hey, what's up?
You need to die if you want to become who you were meant to be. Because you are born with flesh, you are born with ego, and the more you can melt that away and undo the corruption of the world, the more you can align with what is within you, with Christ which dwells within you, align with the conscience which is within you, align with the spirit, the guiding voice which is within you, the closer you will step into being who you need to be. And now this looks like an ad, so I'm gonna skip this here.
What's up, guys? This video is like, you got back to the crumbs that God. It's time and time again that elp.com/Janko. Now let's get back to the show. But it's time and time again that every time a man sacrifices for God, the crumbs that God gives over to the man is greater than the sacrifice that the man gave to God.
Well, that's the covenant, right? That's
I saw
the
that
deal that God offers Abraham.
I realize
And it's also a promise. It is also a promise that if you do what's necessary, you will receive what's promised.
I was bringing up Abraham. Like he didn't one time, but two times told somebody that his wife was his sister because he was terrified. And then I sit there and I think we always make jokes. Well, if I was walking with God, that I would have been like, no, that's my wife. Da 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 da. But if you keep reading, the man not only doesn't touch his wife, blesses him with stuff that he could carry with workers, gold, fruit. Like he left stronger than he did walking into the place that he had fear with. And then I realized with David, he also fell, and we also make the comment: if God chose him, why would he do this? Why would he do that? And then I came to the conclusion that a righteous man isn't a perfect man or a man who's actually obedient, but a righteous man in God's eyes is a man who knows that he's like just a filthy rag without God. And then the one that plays the victim is trying to tell God, what are you talking? I gave you this. You should be grateful that I gave you this. And it's a position of pride. And so, like, God's really looking at the reflecting of the
That's
heart.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to be prideful if you're going to call God out, which is what Cain does, right? He says, what's going on here? I'm working myself to the bone and nothing I do is accepted. And then there's Abel, and the sun shines on him all the time. And God says two things to him. He first says, if you did well, you'd be accepted, which is a brutal rejoinder, because he lays it at Cain's feet. And then the second thing he says is something like, you're blaming your misery on your failure, but that's not the right causal story. So imagine that if you're failing and things aren't going well for you, there's a variety of attitudes you could take, right? You could curse God and die.
Job.
You could blame other people. You could become bitter and resentful and murderous and genocidal, which is essentially Cain's descent.
Yeah.
Or you could take responsibility for your failure. You could learn and you could change. Those are all equally probable, equally possible causal outcomes.
It's also the thing that once you start to get to know God, once you start to get closer to God, you realize that life is actually not unfair, that there are patterns. And if you align with these patterns, your life will be better. You stop being a victim. You stop being a victim to your circumstances. You stop being enslaved to your circumstances, and you actually regain the power, because responsibility is synonymous with power.
Well, what God tells Cain is that he says to him,
And you also see this reflected in the world. Like if you look out at the people and how their thinking works, people who are disaligned with God, they suffer and they curse the system. They think it is unjust because they don't see, they don't understand, and so they wallow in self-pity and victimization. And their problem is not that they are victims. Their problem is that they have a victim mentality in their head, right? You see the same thing. For example, I live in Switzerland. And I remember there was like a strike where the women would march on the streets and stop the flow of cars and block all the roads with their shields in the air and dressed like harlots, barely any clothes, and talk about how oppressed they are while they are actively oppressing the people and being like it's a mental thing. It's all attitude. This is also why a person can be really prideful, but not good at all, and a person can try to be so hard to be good, but all they will see is their own imperfections. And this keeps bringing them into a state of humility, because it is true, if you try to follow God, if you try to purify yourself, that's only when you realize how filthy you are. I didn't realize how disgusting I am until I truly started to do what is right. And that's when all these things come up, because that's when you're trying to shine a light on the parts you hide from yourself that are within yourself. So this is, yeah, the attitude determines where you're gonna go. And the attitude is not always reflective of where you truly are, because what matters isn't where you are, but the attitude you have, because the attitude you have is going to determine where you're going to go.
probable, equally.
Because even Cain and Abel, they started from the same standpoint. You and me, we start from the same standpoint, but or you and the world, you start from the same standpoint. But are you going to do the same? Are you going to take responsibility, or are you going to be a victim of your circumstances? Are you going to be stuck in materialistic worldviews and think it's just a physicality? And so, what are you going to do? Or are you going to align with your inner guidance and do what you came here to do and do the hard thing. Rid yourself of your addiction so you can finally inspire people and help people and whatever it is that your calling or mission is, because you have a mission as he has, as I have, as we all do.
You could learn and you could change. Those are all equally probable, equally possible causal outcomes. Well, what God tells Cain is that he says to him, you're outlining this tale of failure and you're laying that at my feet. The cosmos I created is insufficient for you, but you're missing an intervening variable. He says, sin crouches at your door like a sexually aroused predatory animal, and you let it in to have its way with you, which is, it's a very, very harsh diagnosis. But the idea, and the idea is correct, is that
He's flirting with sin.
Idea is that you are in between heaven and hell, and you are choosing to invite hell, and therefore you bring hell upon yourself, fundamentally speaking.
more than that, he's dallying with it. He's letting it possess him. But the sexual metaphor is purposeful. He's entering into a creative union with the spirit of resentment and bitterness. And this is what people do. Like, I've studied the kids, for example, the Columbine killers who shot up the high school.
Bite killers?
Columbine.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and they brooded on their resentment for maybe thousands of hours. Well, you can get a long way down a very deep rabbit hole if you brood on your resentment for 1,000 hours. And God only knows what you're inviting in. And you do invite it in because the way that your psyche operates is that, this is a terrible thing to understand, the spirit of your aim answers your prayers. So if you're obsessed with resentment and revenge, then the spirit of resentment and revenge will reveal itself to you in your imagination. That's how your thoughts work. So
Ask in my name and you shall receive. It is not what you pray for, right? A lot of Christians, help me with this, do this for me, God. Allow this to happen, spare me from this pain. No, you need to first put yourself in the proper place so that you can say the proper prayer and then you will receive. Because Christ says, ask in my name and you shall receive. What does he mean with his name? Christ dwells within you. The Spirit is one with him. The Spirit is within you. So if you align with that Spirit and you ask from the proper standpoint, you will receive everything that you want. But you need to align yourself first.
reveal itself to you in your imagination. That's how your thoughts work. So
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Does this coincide with him saying, seek and you shall find?
no, that's a gospel statement.
I know, but when I read that statement and I try to break it down to people,
Yes, it does. I see what
because
you
it's
mean.
not just
Yeah, in some sense, there is a parallel, of course.
seeking God. If I'm seeking vengeance, you'll find it. It's kind of like when
Yes,
somebody
that's
looks
right.
at his
Oh.
life, he's looking for a problem, you'll
But no, I wouldn't say that's a parallel. That's just, I personally wouldn't say that's a parallel because the context of what it is talking about is more so if you're seeking truth or love or God, you're going to find the very thing I just talked about, which is Christ, which is your spirit, which is your conscience. And then you're going to find what you truly want, which is heaven. This is the context of what it is talking about. But yes, in a sense, it also applies to if you have a misaligned aim, you're going to hit a misaligned target. But that's not what you ultimately seek, right? It is in your corruption you seek that. In your corruption, you seek sexual fulfillment rather than to help and uplift people because you are corrupted. So it's not truly what you seek. You get what I don't like the parallel here
God. If I'm
because it's different
seeking
context.
vengeance, you'll find it. It's kind of like when
Yes,
somebody
that's
looks
right,
at his
that's
wife,
right.
he's looking for a problem, you'll find it.
Yes, well, that you see, your perceptions are navigating tools. So when you're operating in the world, when you're walking somewhere,
Yeah.
you orient your eyes towards your goal,
Yeah.
and you see a pathway, you see tools and obstacles, you see friends and foes. Sometimes you see agents of magical transformation. They change your aim. That's their purpose.
Yeah.
And your thoughts are exactly like that. Once you establish an aim, then the revelations that will make themselves manifest to you are oriented towards that aim. So, people ask, well, are prayers answered?
Or not oriented to that aim, but in that case, you would refuse these thoughts or impulses.
It's like, well, it depends on. People ask, well, are prayers answered? It's like, well, it depends on who you're praying to, how you're praying,
I thought he was gonna say it depends on who's asking.
and what it is that you're aiming at. They'll be answered. Like something will answer, and you bloody well better be sure that the wrong thing isn't answering.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens to Cain, is that you see that idea reflected in horror culture, right? There's the idea, for example, that you have to invite a vampire in.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's the same. That's a very old idea. You have to open your heart. And imagine that around the spirit of resentment, there's a cloud of concepts and motivations. And some of those would spring from your own soul, so to speak. They'd be personal to you, but a lot of them are part of the cultural tradition that's emerged around representations of evil. Well, that whole complex is a complex of associated ideas. It's alive. It's living. It's instantiated in people's minds. And it's a personality. It's a distributed personality. It's very complex. It's the personality of evil. It's represented in horror movies and all the time, fragments of it. But it has a totality, which is like the complex of ideas. And it's alive. This is why Christ refers to the kingdom of heaven, for example, as a mustard seed. His metaphor for ideas is a seed. And that's right. Well, if you plant a seed, if you allow a seed to be planted in your mind, you have no idea what plant it will grow into. And if you dally with the most pathological of motivations, you have no idea what you're inviting in.
Yeah, take every thought captive.
So how do you remove a bad seed, or how do you water one? Like, is it practice and repetition? What do you have your eyes and ears on?
I think part of it is practice and repetition. That's part of the purpose of like a religious ritual, like a prayer ritual. If you strip the idea of prayer of its magical element, let's say, so let's just do that to begin with, because it's always better to keep things simple. What you're doing when you practice a prayer is attempting to orient yourself towards the highest possible good. So in the Sermon on
At least that's what it should be, yeah.
the Mount, this is what Christ tells his followers to do. He says, orient yourself to what is highest. Then remember that your fellow men are created in the image of God. Then pay attention to the moment. It's that sequence, right? And it's often portrayed as like a hippie discussion. Take no thought of the morrow, right? But that isn't what it means. It means when you
That's
begin
the bootleg
something.
version of it.
Yeah.
It's the devil separating the spirit from the words.
Yeah, it's creative omission.
Yeah.
It's like the civil rights activists who use the Exodus line, let my people go.
Yeah.
That's not the line. The line is, let my people go so they may worship me in the desert. That's not the same thing. It's a vision of ordered freedom, not anarchic freedom.
Yeah. Cherry picking could be a problem. It's the devil's favorite tool.
There's
Amen. It is.
there's many favorite tools. So you asked about practice. Well, part of what you practice, part of what a religious practice is to remember to orient yourself towards the highest good. So there's an insistence, for example, in the Old Testament that the firstborn should be consecrated to God. That means something psychological.
Best you can give first belongs to God, or your purpose or righteousness. That's what it means, the firstborn. You know, your most effort, that which you care about most, God comes first.
It means that when you undertake a new venture, whatever that is, a new episode in your day, you should first stop and orient yourself to what's highest so that you set the frame for the event.
Focus on righteousness first, and all of these things shall be added on to you. Once again, what I've talked about earlier with responsibility is aligned with a promise, right? It's not just you're called to do something, you're also promised something if you embark on that journey and follow that calling,
And that's
which is alignment, heaven, and not only heaven after this life, but heaven which starts within this life, a purpose, a meaning.
so that you set the frame for the event. And that's part of the purpose of saying grace at the table. So remember, you're trying to, and then when you understand it that way, the first idea that might spring to mind is, well, why would you not do that? Like if you have the opportunity to make each of the episodes in your life go as well as they possibly could, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? Well, it requires discipline, it requires attention, so those are the costs, but the benefits are supreme.
Yeah.
And how could they not be? Well, what are you going to do? Not aim or aim down? If you aim down, you can go down. If you aim poorly, you can fragment yourself. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And much of this is very concrete. You know, people wrestle with issues of faith. Does God exist? I mean, God, you could say in some ways that God is beyond the categories of exist and not exist. So it's a nonsensical question in some ways. The way to concretize it is, well, whenever you do something, you're aiming at something. Why wouldn't you aim at what's best? And you might say, well, how do I know what's best? And it's like, well, you can practice, you know, like almost always when you're in any situation, you can see worse paths and better paths, let's say.
I think what he's trying to get at in some point here, and obviously what I also said with God, does God even exist in that sense, in the way we define existence, is also, you know, another reason why he's obviously a little bit controversial when it comes to if he's really a Christian or if he's not. To me, it is totally clear why he is a Christian or why he isn't. And they're gonna get to that. I've seen a short of that. But I feel like what he's trying to get to here is let's watch
Whenever
this
you do
again.
something, you're aiming at something. Why wouldn't you aim at what's best?
It's not, you don't need to start with trying to understand the thing which you can't even like trying to understand or establish if there is a God beyond space, time, and matter, and trying to think to even think you could have a accurate perception of the fullness of such a God, but rather to look inward and look at what's right ahead. Can you detect that there is higher and lower? Can you detect that right now, as you're watching this video, or once you've finished watching this video, that you have multiple options and that you can recognize that there's a hierarchy of what's better and what's worse? And so, what is on top of that? What is at the bottom of that? What does it mean if you aim upwards or higher or lower? Because that's the thing, once you can establish that there is a hierarchy of good or worse actions. For example, you can go to McDonald's and then you can come home and you can, I don't know, do some masturbation and play video games and then drink yourself to sleep. Or you could, I don't know, go to the gym, clean your room, right? This is why his advice is clean your room, because it is so fundamental. It is the first step in following God, doing that which is right in front of you. So I think, I'm not sure, I think what he's trying to get at here in some sense is also that don't be too concerned with trying to understand the end or the fullness or full embodiment of God at the end, but focus on what is right in front of you. Can you discern? Can you recognize there's a higher and lower? There's a good and bad path for you to take right now, and then focus on taking the good path. And here's also something which I've learned over the years, that the more you take that good path, the closer you get to actually understanding what's on top, which is God, because you get closer to God. The knowledge of God is in direct correlation to your closeness with God. And so if you keep doing what is right, you will feed the knowing of God, because you get closer to Him and you get closer to understanding the end. This is also something I talk about in a lot of my videos. Don't try to think you understand everything or you need to understand everything. Focus on what's right in front of you. Every single step will be revealed in due time. Your conscience, your compass, it might give you ideas, it might give you visions of what your ultimate calling in life is, but it's not going to be very clear. What's going to be clear is what you need to do right now. You need to quit smoking. You need to stop drinking. You need to take on this job, or you need to quit this job, or you need to do this, or you shouldn't do that. I think that's what he's trying to get to.
And you might say, well, how do I know what's best? And it's like, well, you can practice, you know, like almost always when you're in any situation, you can see worse paths and better paths, let's say.
Exactly. I haven't watched this yet, by the way. I promise. First time I'm seeing this.
Can you see the best path? Well, possibly not, because your vision is clouded and your aim is uncertain, but
You can know something.
you can do your best to aim up.
Yep.
And then you might ask yourself, well, if you practiced that for decades religiously, wouldn't your aim improve?
Wouldn't you get better at it? Wouldn't you go closer to what's highest, and therefore wouldn't your knowledge of God start to increase? Right? Exactly what I said.
Well, most things improve if you practice them. You know, one thing I practiced quite diligently was paying attention to the physical consequences of my words. Like I noticed when I was young, in my early 20s, that after I'd figured out some of the things I just discussed with you, that many of the things I said made me feel weak. And then when most of them really, 95% of them to begin with, and then I realized that I was using my language as a show, you know, a show of dominance or a show of intellectual superiority, or to attract attention, or to win an argument, or as a means of combat, like instrumentally. And what I tried to do was replace that by just saying what I thought to be true and letting that go wherever it went. And that's a form of faith, right? Because faith in the truth is the presumption that whatever happens, if you say the truth, is the best thing that could happen, even if you can't see it. That's a statement of faith. There's no way out of that, by the way, because the alternative is faith too, is that you can manipulate using your language and that that'll work.
This is so deep. This is extremely profound, because if you truly believe that there is such a thing as truth, then you also have to believe that in your own life, the way of truth is going to be what's best for you, even if it comes at the detriment of literally everything. This is also why the Bible says, he who clings to his life will lose it, but he who is willing to give up his life for my sake shall find it. If you cling, or if you think you can outplay the system, you are deceived. You're gonna sell out earlier or later. Only if you truly have that aim embedded in stone through practice and rigorous repetition will you be able to speak the truth and live out your truth, even if it comes at the detriment of everything. So there's small things in your life, you know. Are you gonna say the truth, or are you gonna sugarcoat it a little bit? If you were to truly believe in God, and if you were to truly be a Christian, which nobody is because we're all imperfect, you would say exactly what the truthful thing is. But here's the thing, don't take the spirit away from the message or from the words, which is what George said earlier, which is also very profound. This doesn't mean you have to say the right thing or the true thing in every situation. For example, I've mentioned this example earlier or before as well, in another video, not this one. If your girlfriend comes and she doesn't look too nice in a dress or whatever, you might just tell a lie, because again, there's a hierarchy. What's most important, what's most truthful, right? Love. So, don't misunderstand, but this notion of speaking the truth is something that is much more profound than a lot of people understand,
Even if you can't
and something you can immediately start doing.
see it. That's a statement of faith.
Like right now, think about your relationships, think about future discussions or talks you will have with people. Think about how you might say things differently if you truly focused on telling the truth.
There's no way out of that, by the way, because the alternative is faith too, is that you can manipulate using your language and that that'll work. That's a statement of faith
Well,
too.
also, people have a problem with they believe their own lies, so that can
Yeah,
get tricky.
well, all you have to do is tell them to yourself a few times, and
Yeah, ego attachment.
Believe their own lies, so that can
yeah,
get tricky.
well, all you have to do is tell them to yourself a few times, and you'll
Yeah.
believe them. I mean, there's
Self-deception.
experiments showing that if you bring people into a lab and you give them a survey of their political beliefs, let's say, and most people's political beliefs are very shallow. They're not well fleshed out, so they're empty, you might say. They're low resolution. You have them then write a 500-word essay arguing against their stated position. Then you have them come back a week later and measure their attitudes. Their attitudes shift dramatically in the direction of the essay. So of course
Yeah, because their knowledge of a given point of view increased, right? A lot of people, they have opinions, but they're not informed. If you say this whole screen, right, what you're looking through or whatever, PC or laptop is the full container of knowledge, and you have a little bit knowledge here, this is going to be your opinion. But if you have a little bit knowledge on this side, this is going to become your opinion, even though the truth would still be this, but you know more about this than this, right? Because your perception is skewed in the sense that it is skewed by what you know, not by what there is to know.
if you lie to yourself, the lies start to become part of the way you perceive the world. This is a terrifying thing to understand because
But also, it's reflecting like, okay, let's time travel back to what you just said about Cain and Abel, and then forward it to what you were saying about the seeking part of it,
Yeah.
and then having your eyes on the right thing. Recently, I found a lot of joy and peace because I've reflected on everything. All these Bible verses perfectly reflect each other, and I think that's what makes the gospel so a miracle book.
Yeah, the gospel also says that no library with even 1,000 books would ever be enough to contain the message or something like that. I'm paraphrasing here because it is as deep as something can be because it is hinting to and talking about the same divine underlying principle over and over and over and over. And you can go infinitely deep into that because God is infinitely deep.
Other than other people writing a book, right? It perfectly sits on top of a miracle book. Other than other people writing a book, right? It perfectly sits on top of each other.
yeah, that's right. It's the first hyperlinked text.
Ever.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything.
There's 65,000 cross references, first order cross references in the Bible.
And I'm such a baby at this, but the one thing that I've learned is I kept asking God, hey, God, I want to go aim for my best, shoot high, do all this. But my perception is my perspective. So if I sit down with you and I learn from you, what I absorb from you is now my perspective. But it's not the Lord's perspective because what you shared with me might be true, or it might be true, or maybe I didn't understand you, or maybe I didn't take the part that you really wanted me to learn. So then I realized that the aiming part is giving me a lot of anxiousness because I'm listening to the lies and not the truth. And so then I reflected on a Bible verse that said, seek first the kingdom.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, what does this mean? And then I keep reading, and it says, seek first the kingdom, and then the rest shall come.
Right,
And then
right.
it's such a broad statement. And I sit that piece, and I put it right there. And then I go fast forward to when Peter walked on the water with Jesus. When his eyes was on God, he could breathe. When he took him off of God, he sunk and he felt like he couldn't breathe. Now, when I sit with people
That's
that are
good.
anxious, they usually make it seem like they're drowning, that they can't breathe, that they're trying to grasp for air or reach a place of peace. And so now when I'm searching, I'm realizing maybe Instagram isn't where I should be putting my eyes on for 8 hours on the day. Maybe I should be focusing it on God. And then as soon as I started focusing it on God, like how we're sitting down here, my perception and perspective started to bleed out because I'm starting to realize that it's lies. I've been lying to myself.
What about?
Yeah, if your aim changes, even if you're failing at following your aim, to the degree you manage to follow your higher aim is to the degree you will walk closer into the fullness of truth, is which you will allow yourself to even further change your aim, right? This is why when you stop being on Instagram, when you stop being on social media, your perspective shifts because you stop subjecting yourself to brainwash all the time, making you think that everybody is just flesh and we're all corrupt and we all think the same, because that's what social media does. And so your aim starts to grow and get better, and as you follow that, you get more knowledge, you get more wisdom, you start to get closer to what you want.
Out
Same thing.
because I'm starting to realize that it's lies. I've been lying to myself.
What about?
just peace in general. Like, for example, there's two gods to this earth. There's the real God that I believe is Yeshua. And then there's another God that I fall victim to, and I realize I bend my knee to him all the time, and it's money and it's power. Because I don't think of it as an evil way, but I think of it, look, I need to provide. I got to do what my God asked me to do. Be fruitful and multiply. But sometimes we keep our eyes off of what we're
I don't like how he uses verses sometimes. Be fruitful and multiply. This wrong context, right? You should use a biblical verse if it is hinting to a similar principle, but it's not hinting to like, you get what I'm like. It's a wrong application of this specific verse right there. I feel like.
to do. Be
You know what he's trying to say? It's like, yeah, you need to bring fruits for your God, but that's not really what the point was when God said, "Be fruitful and multiply." You know what? It's a wrong application.
fruitful and multiply. But sometimes we keep our eyes
I wasn't talking. Yeah,
off of what
whatever.
we're aiming at. Sorry, we keep our eyes off of God so much and we stick it to what we're aiming at that we start worshiping what we're aiming at.
You do
Yeah, that's also what a lot of Jordan Peterson's work is about, right? Your hierarchy is that which is on top, is that which you truly worship. If you've watched my reaction to the Jubilee video, where people said, where he said that you all have a God, and God is that which you care about most. Maybe that is your survival. Maybe that is your wife that takes on the place of God. That or it holds that thing to the same esteem a believer holds God to. And this is also when the Bible says worshiping false idols. This doesn't mean you have witches in their room with doing rituals or whatever. No, this is people sacrificing their morality or foregoing or twisting what they know to be truth in order for example, material gain. So that is what true idolatry really is.
worship what you aim at.
Yeah, that we start
And yeah, it is. If you know, if you're in a position like him, he has a lot of influence. He probably has a lot of money because of his influence. Like, it can corrupt you. Money is not the source of evil. The love of money is the source of evil. Because a lot of biblical figures were pretty rich, and if you follow God, you are more likely to be rich than to be poor, contrary to what a lot of people think. Like, yes, God will humble you. Yes, there are a lot of poor believers, but the person who's more likely going to be truly prosperous and healthy is the person who follows God. Now, this might not necessarily be financially, but even in a lot of ways, the person who learns to take on responsibility, to forsake short term pleasure, to aim up and to sacrifice is more likely going to be the person who's going to end up with monetary gain or physical wealth. Focus on righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. I'll be quiet now.
worshiping what we're aiming at.
You do worship what you aim at.
Yeah.
That's the definition. This is something that it's very useful to understand if you're trying to understand what worship means. Worship means celebrate, and there's no difference. You celebrate what you aim at. Well, why? Well, because you devote your time, effort, and attention to what you aim at. That's a celebration, and the most intense form of celebration is worship. You worship what you aim at. It's a definition. People say, well, you know, they don't believe or they don't worship. They just don't understand what it means.
Yeah.
You worship what you aim at.
You know what it makes me think of is, and I believe it's Romans 8, is a mind led by the flesh is death, but a mind led by the spirit is peace and joy. Mm-hmm. And so it would be the same thing where it's what, do I fall back on my own understanding of what my flesh desires, what my flesh thinks it's right? Or am I going to lead back on what I believe God would want me to follow and lead?
You can think about that. It's useful to think about that psychologically. So part of the hallmark of immaturity is possession by a succession of short-term goals, short-term, self-oriented goals. So
Could you break that down for us?
Well, if you're 2 years
Following your short term impulses, usually this leads you into hedonism.
old, you're hungry, and then you're tired, and then you're hot, and then you're cold, and then you're tired, and it's just there's no temporal expanse, there's no tomorrow, there's just now, and there's really no integration of other people. So Piaget, the developmental psychologist, pointed out that 2-year-olds have a hard time with joint play. They can't establish a joint goal with another child, and so 2-year-olds will play beside each other but not with each other. Once you establish a game, you both have to accept the same goal. So, for example, if a little boy asks a little girl to play house, Well, first of all, he has to make the offer. It has to be an invitation, and she has to voluntarily agree. Well, and then they both have the same goal, okay? Now, because they have the same goal, they have the same perceptions. And because they have the same goal and the same perceptions, now they experience things in an emotionally similar manner. So now they're unified. Well, as you mature, your ability to play longer and longer term games with more and more people increases. And your focus on narrow self-satisfaction declines. Now,
This is also why he used the example of a 2-year-old, because it's primarily flesh against spirit. So what is the 2-year-old primarily in the example he used? It is just biological impulses. I'm cold, I'm warm, I'm hungry. And so as you start to mature, you start to take in more information, more consideration, more hierarchies start to appear than the immediate satisfaction of your fleshly or biological desires. And so you start to increase your horizon, you start to increase the information you take in, which leads you to orient yourself in a different way.
it turns out that a corollary of that is that pursuit of narrow self-satisfaction is indistinguishable from anxiety and misery.
Yes, because when you follow the desires of the flesh, you will fall into hedonism, and then you will have depression, anxiety, and hopelessness.
So
Hell, right? Heaven and hell, where do you walk to? Same thing, it's all the same thing.
the psychologists who laid out the big 5 personality dimensions looked at how words were associated with one another. Their notion was that the linguistic corpus, the language, contained a model of personality that was accurate. So if you looked at how words were associated, you could find the basic dimensions of personality. That actually worked out quite well. And one of the basic dimensions is neuroticism, and that's the proclivity to experience negative emotion, anxiety, pain, frustration, disappointment, grief, guilt. Those are the main, anger. Those are the main ones. If you're likely to experience one, you're more likely to experience all of them. And people differ in their threshold and their intensity. Self-consciousness is indistinguishable from neuroticism. So the rule is, it's an unbelievable thing to understand, is if you're thinking about yourself, your narrow, encapsulated self, yourself in relationship to other people, you're miserable. And it makes sense if you think about it even biologically, because human beings are extremely social creatures, right? We're so social that you can punish psychopaths by isolating them, right? So you can take the worst people,
Right.
and if you forcibly isolate them, that makes them suffer. So that's how social human beings are. And the concentration on yourself,
Yeah,
well,
super
concentration on
You just blew
yourself is a
past
violation. It's a violation of that sociality. So to aim at we talked about aiming at the kingdom of God. Well, that's an aim of sacrificial service. And you might say, well, to what? Well, to harmony, to peace, to others, to yourself, really, over the longest possible span of time, because that narrow focus on the flesh, let's say, it's not a good medium to long-term strategy. It's a very bad long-term strategy. So in a marriage, for example,
Yeah, because long term your aim goes downward rather than upwards.
you're supposed to,
And if you stay in ignorance, if you stay in ego, if you stay in the spirit of rebellion of Cain, you will never change your aim, which would lead to a better place.
husband and the wife are supposed to subordinate themselves to the service of the logos that unites the couple, right? So you're not subordinate to him and he's not subordinate to you. You're both subordinate to the higher order aim of the marriage, right? And that's your master. And the way that Christianity sacralizes that is to represent the union of the couple as the place where the Spirit of Christ can manifest itself.
It's a reflection of the bride and groom. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's the metaphor. That's the religious metaphor. Yeah, and so you're supposed to serve, well, you serve what's highest. Well, that makes itself manifest in all sorts of different ways. Truth is one
That's deeper, though, because, for example, a lot of men don't understand. They run away from the sacrifice. They sometimes think that sacrifice is, well, I'm working 40 hours a week. No, that's your duty. That's not your sacrifice. Your sacrifice would be like, I gotta tell my wife what she just did with so and so is very wrong. That's gonna sacrifice my night now because she's gonna be upset. I have to relay this message, but how am I gonna do this in a way where it's not gonna ruin my night? Oh, obviously it's gonna ruin my night, but this position will make her stronger the next time she walks into the room. But it's the sacrifice that people don't want to take is being the bad guy. And it's sometimes what God did to Cain or Abel. And it was kind of like, hey, these are your problems that you need to work on. And he didn't look at his problems and want to work on it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, sometimes tough love is required. This is also why you need a father figure, for example, because you need a father to set clear boundaries. You need a father to not allow you to be swallowed up by the motherly compassion, so to speak, and to help the mother discern between where her empathy and compassion is used and where you as a man need to step in and give your child a little bit of tough love. Because what he's talking about here with the example of the marriage, where he needs to correct his wife or tell her what she maybe doesn't want to hear, and he's going to be looked at the bad guy, is the same thing they've talked about earlier, which is speaking the truth, which is focused on righteousness, and all these things shall be added onto you. Over the long term, you're better off communicating in truth, right? Even in relationships, I can tell you, you're the only girl in my world. You're all that I care about. I love you more than anything else. But if you don't have the humility and honesty to say like, no, of course I'm a man, I'm going to be attracted to other women, etc., but despite that I'll choose you. If you choose to lie to one another and be in ignorance, that's not good for the long term. If you can actually be honest with one another and communicate openly that, yeah, look, I have these desires, but despite that I'll choose you and I'll work on that, and I'll be that good man, or I'll be that good woman. That's much better in the long term, even though there's going to be temporary short-term friction. And in a lot of ways, bearing your cross is exactly that: temporary short-term friction, sacrificing right now so you can aim upwards, carrying your cross so you can go up the hill, suffering in the now so you can go to heaven. Hell and heaven, same thing.
What I'm saying or no?
So there's an echo of that in the Exodus story. So Moses leads his people away from the tyrant, right? The Pharaoh. But that's how the story is often conceptualized, but that's not sufficiently accurate. Moses does two things. He overturns the tyrant, the Pharaoh, but he also overturns the slaves, because the Israelites under the Pharaoh had become slaves. And they're just as responsible for the tyranny as the tyrant.
Yeah.
Right? There's no tyrants without slaves. Now, slaves are people who lack a vision of the promised land. Okay, now, you might ask yourself, why do people consort with tyranny? Why do they put up with it? And part of the answer to that is they don't want to pay the short-term cost. So when the Israelites free themselves from tyranny, they don't go to the promised land. They go to the desert.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that means something. It means that when you're dominated by a false idea and you determine to sacrifice it, you're going to be in the desert for a while, because that idea has integrated. It serves as a source of integration, even if it's pathological. And whatever it integrated falls apart and torments you. You'll be purposeless, for example. And it requires the generation of a new vision, a new and more comprehensive vision, to rectify that. People have all sorts of reasons for not making the sacrifice that you described. There's going to be trouble. This is why people don't tell the truth.
Because they're scared of
Yes.
the retaliation of it.
Well, look,
Conflict.
yes,
They want to run back to being a slave.
Conflict. That was cute.
Conflict.
yes,
They want to run back to being a slave. Is this what you're trying to describe with the Wilderness Act? Like, they were set free on their way to milk and honey, but because of the lack of faith of God's promise, they wandered around, and eventually they missed being a slave. And
they missed being slaves. They complained about not being able to be slaves constantly on the voyage.
I've met so many human beings that have a relationship with God that yearn to be a slave again.
Yes, because even if you quit yourself from sin, before you can step over into, or before you can go to the other side, You will be in this middle ground where you will wallow and remember the positives of being a slave to addiction and pleasure and fornication, etc. And that's why a lot of people they yearn for that, because there's a transitionary phase where you will face the fact that you're not with God, that you're not reaping fruits, and then you're also going to face the consequences of your previous indulgence, and then you're also not indulging at the present moment. So it's like you're going down, and in order to go up, you need to voluntarily go down even lower so that you can go up again. So but there is freedom. You do come to the other side, but then again, never fully, because you are always still to some degree imperfect, in darkness, tempted, not in heaven, right? You only taste heaven here. You can't actualize it. Only once you are in the afterlife, in true heaven, is when you will truly be set free. Because even I, who maybe help you understand things or maybe not, who knows? If you're watching this far, I'm glad you're here, and I'm hoping that my commentary adds something to it. Even me, who is quote unquote helping you or teaching you or whatever, or simplifying things, because that's what I'm often trying to do. Even I think about the slavery and I miss it sometimes, but it's not me, it's my flesh, because the joint, it feels good. Fornication, it feels good, but it's sweet in the mouth but very bitter in the stomach. So this transitionary phase, this can be very long depending on your actions. And yeah, this is a time of suffering that a lot of people need to go through, especially today, if you have lived the same way the world has lived and now you're trying to change your ways. There is freedom. You do arrive at the other side eventually, but you got to walk through the fire first. You got to burn for a little while.
Many human beings that have a relationship with God that yearn to be a slave again. And it's, I think what you're describing to me, and I could be getting you wrong, but there's so many processes that needs to be taking place for you to have a healthy relationship with the Lord. And the first step is the tiny sacrifice, the short-term sacrifices, and it's even those that they don't want to make. Is that
But then you don't really have a relationship with God. I mean, yeah.
where I'm kind of gathering, or am I kind of being lost?
No, I think that's right. I mean, you told a story of not wanting to bring up a painful truth because of the disruption it would cause.
Yeah. By the way, hypothetical.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, hypothetical. I forgot to say that. I'm so sorry.
Of course.
It's usually her telling me.
But obviously, like, people lie because they want to escape from a deserved punishment or because they want to gain something that they didn't earn. Those are the basic. See, those are the two temptations that Satan lays before Christ in the desert.
Yeah.
Right? He says to him, he tempts him to turn the stones into bread, and he tempts him to throw himself off a high place to be saved. Well, that's the root cause of deception, let's say. You lie because you want to get something you didn't earn, or you want to escape from a consequence that you walked into, right? And so people, now the alternative to that is to say what's true, but the consequence of that is that there's going to be a demolition of a small form of tyranny, yours or someone else's, and a period of loss. That's the upset. The notion, this is what's played out in Job, the notion is that all things considered over the medium to long run, that willingness to grapple with the momentary disruption is the most effective way of moving forward. And I think that really is you really have to begin experimenting with that in faith. Faith in that circumstance would be belief, as I said earlier, that no matter what happens to you, if you tell the truth, that's the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah.
Right? All things considered. The thing is, this is what Job realizes in the story of Job. He doesn't have all the answers. He can't. He's not omniscient. He's always working with insufficient data. So even when he's suffering unjustly, which happens to him in the story, he's unwilling to draw the final conclusion that all he should do is curse God and die, because he doesn't know the whole story. And so what he decides to do is to maintain faith in his essential goodness and in the goodness of God, regardless regardless, as his initial position. And that, see, it's the case. I just did a course for.
And here's the interesting thing. Even if God wasn't good, even if the belief in the essential goodness of God was unjustified, for as long as you have that attitude, you will profit. You will take better actions. And that in of itself is very profound. This shows you this whole notion that the worshipper is the one that benefits, not the one who is worshipped, right? If you worship God, you are the one who benefits. If you humble yourself, you are the one who benefits. If you sacrifice, you benefit. If you pray, you benefit, right? And also this notion of faith, again, if you're indulging and you're enjoying it in the beginning a lot, but you're slowly walking to hell during that transitioning phase, faith is also required, right? Because in the beginning, you don't know if you're ever going to be free. You don't know if you can actually truly leave this life behind, be reborn and become a new person. And obviously, this is not something that happens overnight, but as you start to rid yourself of one or the other thing, you start to attain more knowledge and you start to realize that your faith was justified. And this strengthens your faith and gives you even more faith because faith comes into play where knowledge ends. But if you start to recognize patterns, if you start to recognize that your faith is justified, it is no longer faith, it becomes knowledge, it becomes knowing or gnosis, you could even say. And then you can start to extend your faith because the basis of where you're at, you're knowing, it starts to increase as you walk towards God. And so you have more, you can go higher with more faith. You get what I'm trying to say?
Initial position. And that, see, it's the case. I just did a course for Peterson Academy on Mircea Eliade's book, The Sacred and the Profane. And one of the things that Eliade, who's a great historian of religions, is at pains to demonstrate is that whenever you take possession of a new territory, which means whenever you really engage in any activity, you put down a stake somewhere to indicate the central point. You have to do that to establish the rules of the game. The rules of the game are aspects of faith. And there's no way out of that. You can't establish anything without some movement of faith. Well, so then the question is, what should you have faith in? Well, the highest good. Why would you have faith in anything else other than the highest good? I mean, when you think about it in that way, it just seems self-evident. Now, you might sacrifice.
Because you're better off even if you're wrong, you know?
Self-evident. Now,
But you're not wrong. Thanks be to God. Thank you, God, that you are good. Thank you, God, that you are love and not anything else.
you might sacrifice that for short-term gain. You were talking about that with regards to money, for example, or security. You know, and it isn't money that's the root of all evil, right? It's the love of money that's the root of all evil.
Yeah,
right?
money's
So
a
it's-
tool. It can heighten who your heart really is. If you're generous when you're poor, you'll be generous when you're rich. If you're greedy when you're poor, you'll most likely be greedy when you're rich. It's just a reflection of who you are. It's just an access.
Well, something that this made me think of, because we're speaking about lying, and that really is like a bad seed to have. And something that I've realized, in those last few years, is that lying is almost a practice. And tell me what you think of this. I feel like sometimes it develops in children, right? Like it's a practice that children start with, whether it's because they're scared to tell their parents the truth, so it's easier for them to lie and get away with it. And I feel like when you practice this as a child, then it becomes something that you use a lot as an adult, and it's kind of hard to break.
Definitely.
Right? So what would you say to, and I know you're doing a series with parents, what would you say to parents to kind of help navigate their children so that they don't fall into the trap of lying?
Well, telling
You, this is a good question. One of the things you should be doing as a parent is not bringing upon a situation where you will continuously enforce the child to lie, because you create such an environment where if the lie gets exposed or you figure out they're lying, all hell breaks loose. This will only make them more likely to lie. You should be actually more accepting and inviting and even be proud of them for telling the truth. Maybe even encourage that. Maybe even quote unquote lessen the punishment, or if they take a step towards you or a step towards truth for that matter, you take a step towards them. You know what I mean? Let's see what he says. He's gonna articulate it better than I am.
navigate their children so that they
It's a podcast about him anyway. Why am I answering? Excuse me.
don't fall into the trap of lying.
Well, telling them the truth yourself is a good start. Telling the truth to your wife or your husband and letting the children see that and engaging in the kind of conflict that exchanging the truth produces and allowing the children to observe that. When you're married, everyone's marriage has difficulties, and it's not because marriage is difficult, it's because life is difficult. And when you're married, you go through those difficulties together. And many of the difficulties that you go through are the consequence of being in an uncertain place. Whenever you know what to do, you're not suffering. It's when you don't know what to do that you're suffering. And when you don't know what to do, it's possible to have different opinions, as you should, because you don't know what to do. And when you're married, you're going to have different opinions when you run into a difficult problem, and then there's going to be conflict. There's no difference between that conflict and communication. There's no difference between that conflict and thinking. They're the same thing. And then engaging in that process is challenging and difficult, because when you exchange genuine information, there's always the sacrifice of what was erroneous, and that casts you into doubt and even shame to some degree. But if the process is adhered to religiously and the problem is rectified, then the children can see that there's a process of truth-mediated conflict and some disruption, but that the consequence of that is the restoration of peace.
Yeah, very deep. Yeah, I said it much better than I said. It's also, children learn by observing, not by what you say. So if you're a smoker and you tell your child don't smoke, they're still gonna smoke because you smoked. They observed it. So that's very good, because children are much more intelligent than we give them credit, right? They're in some sense they're more intelligent than adults are, because they can learn a whole language just by speaking with or being spoken to, right, over the course of a few single digit years. In adulthood, you couldn't do that anymore. So in a sense, they have more openness, they're more intelligent in some sense. And so through them just observing the world, they will recognize patterns subconsciously. Like, this is also why movies are incredibly profound, even children's movies. They will recognize subconscious patterns which should then embed in their own worldview. So it's very profound and much more accurate than what I said, that if you live that out yourself as a parent with your partner, this would actually do much more than if you merely give them an encouraging environment to tell the truth, if they can actually witness it firsthand, because they won't verbally articulate it or understand it, but subconsciously, you have all of these patterns and symbols that you incorporate into your worldview from experience and stories, etc. Because life in of itself is sort of a story that, yeah, that builds your worldview maybe on a much deeper level.
And they need to see that whole process. It's crucial.
Right.
And most people are stunningly bad at negotiation. They just have no idea how to do it, or even that it's possible to say what it is that you need and want, and then to work diligently towards its mutual realization. And
Why?
well, if I let you know what I want and need, then you can hold it over me, right? So it's a revelation of vulnerability. Now, if you don't let your wife or your husband know what you need and want, or you don't let yourself know, which is also very common, well, you're certainly not going to get it unless you think it'll happen by chance, which is very unlikely. But if you're forthright in your requirements, well, you cede a tremendous amount of power. You also, even if you let yourself know what you want, well, then clearly, then you can betray yourself terribly. You know, if you keep your innermost desires opaque to yourself, you can't really fail.
I wonder why people do that, fearing that having somebody else know what they would want. I guess
Because you can be hurt.
well, I guess my brain doesn't activate that way because I was trained and practiced and taught and worshiped the idea that whatever comes to me is given from God. So I have this piece of like, I could share what I want with anybody. I mean, even you, like if I have my thoughts with you, I think you're a very powerful, wise man, but contrary to my God, like we're all a pile of salt. So it's like, why would I fear man if I know that God's with me? And then I remember the verse, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And that one line just broke down everything that you're describing. The truth will give you life, the peace of life. Like, I think that there's dead man walking. They're not alive. They're dead. They're in their own, like, grief and their own mourning. I feel there's just a bunch of Lazarus just walking around me. But I'm starting to realize through this conversation that they're only there because they're fearing the wrong thing. Instead of fearing the Lord, having the beginning of wisdom to make the honest truth, they fear their own pride.
Or other people.
So
You
it's
know, people have
it's
told-
always a
Yeah, this is also why fear is the opposite of love, you know, and this is, I've talked about, I made some YouTube posts on that earlier, a few weeks ago. If you fear God, you don't fear more, you fear less because your fear shifts. Fearing God is not just now you fear a thing more. Fearing God means you don't fear anything else. You shifted what you truly fear.
position of pride.
People have told me repeatedly, commented on my bravery in standing up, let's say, to the
And fear is also synonymous with pride, right? I've talked about this also in previous videos where insecurity is not that different from arrogance because they're both inward looking, but not in the humble or proper way, more in the self-conscious way. And this fear originates from pride. And so the insufficiency gives you insecurity and the abundance gives you pride, but both is bad because you're attached to something you shouldn't be attached to, which is your ego. And this is also why fear is the opposite of love. You see this, for example, I uh I went to the dentist and you know I'm a superstitious person and I had it in my head, you know, it spoke to me. You have to tell your dentist that Jesus loves her before you walk out. And I was like, I'm gonna be embarrassed, I'm gonna be ashamed, you know, I'm a grown ass man and now I'm gonna be telling her that Jesus loves you very much. And I don't know what her faith is. I don't know if she's gonna laugh at me. I don't know if she's gonna mock me. And it was like I was like scared. I was like, oh, scared of being judged or quote unquote embarrassing myself. But then I told her and she said, oh, thank you. And then I walked out and I felt amazing. And then I passed the guy on the street and I like said, hi, Jesus loves you very much and he's coming very soon. And I felt so good afterwards because I had that. What was preventing me from telling her that Christ loves her was fear, right? Ego, pride, fear of being judged. And yeah, this is something. Fear is the opposite of love. Once you start to understand this, a lot of things make sense. It's not hate, it's fear. Because only, you know, only humble, truly humble people in the name of God are the ones who are going to be street preaching. Because most people are going to judge them. Most people are going to pity them. Most people are going to think they're stupid, close-minded, and brainwashed. And you're just going to have to be okay with that. You can't be okay with that if you're in pride. You can't be okay with that if you have an attachment to how you're looked at as by people because you need to be humble so you can be bold. So if you can let go of your attachment to yourself, of your ego, which breeds fear, you can be bold and proclaim the truth and be mocked, laughed at, and spat on. But maybe there's one or two people which you're going to reach. And so once again, you have this aim, my narrow, focused self or own pride and ego, or God, the higher hierarchy of truth.
beginning of wisdom to make the honest truth. They fear their own pride.
or other people.
So
You
it's
know,
a
people have
it's
told-
always a position of pride.
People have told me repeatedly,
Yes. Flesh and spirit. Yes.
commented on my bravery in standing up, let's say, to the appalling progressives in the Canadian government,
Yeah.
which is where all of this insanity started with me.
Yeah.
And it's not bravery. I'm just afraid of different things,
Right.
right? So there isn't anything that I'm more afraid of than losing my tongue. I don't care what people do. Well, I can't say that because it can be brutal.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I don't care or that I'm opaque to that. But I know the difference between minor hell and major hell. And I'd be willing to spend some time in minor hell to avoid major hell. I know.
Yeah, because lies progress. If you don't catch the lie at the root once it starts to come and you let it have its way with you, it's gonna grow, it's gonna get stronger, and then over generations will become indoctrinated by false ideas. You know, like let's think back a few generations back when you had homosexuality in movies, people were appalled. Why would you put this in movie? Like this is disgusting, and it is disgusting. It is unnatural. And slowly but surely they started to be desensitized, right? Or I don't know, when was it, 1920s, 1930s, they started to have the first sex magazines. And in the beginning there was like gigantic uproar because at the local kiosk, I don't know if that's an English word, kiosk, or the, you know, the little store where you buy cigarettes and a few drinks and candy, and there isn't much more, you know, the little stores. There were sex magazines, and they thought, you know, that was the downfall of civilization. I mean, this is gonna, what if children see this? Like, this is horrible. We need to get this out of our society. And look where we're at nowadays, right? It's, if you, this is also what he's talking about. If you don't catch the lie in the beginning, the lie is not gonna go away. The lie is gonna grow, and eventually it's gonna explode in your face.
I learned this again when I was in my early 20s. I learned that there's no difference between a totalitarian state and hell, and that the pathway to hell is paved with lies. That isn't a theory as far as I'm concerned. We know it. In a totalitarian state, everyone lies about absolutely everything to themselves and everyone else 100% of the time. That's hell, right? And so that's what I'm afraid of. That's what you should be afraid of.
I do want to get
seriously.
I want to get in the conversation of your predicament between you and Canada. But before I get into that, I actually am interested in the parenting that you've now. There's this new program that you're created. It's kind of like the Gospels and all these other things that you've created with the Daily Wire. Why did you choose to do this? Was it because your daughter just had a kid and you were inspired to do it, or?
Well, I've been asked to do it a lot, to provide parenting guidelines. It's a funny thing because I had good parents, and my father and my mother were both very attentive to me, and my father was particularly attentive when I was young, and so I learned a lot about how to interact with little kids from that example. And I'm attempting to verbalize it and to make it concrete. For the special that you're describing, I talked to a number of parents who had problems with their children, some of them behavioral, some of them just a consequence of the general catastrophe of life. And so we walked through that, and that's the special on the Daily Wire on parenting. So
Are you teaching anything that could help give them the tools to teach them how to be raised in modern times with like technology, with like Instagram?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know if anybody has the answer to that.
It is. I was hoping you did, because I was like, we're God willing, one day we're going to be having kids soon, and it's just now I just see a bunch of kids holding iPads. Like,
Yeah, well,
I'm very worried about that.
Well, the screens are very dangerous, and that danger is going to increase because you can see this happening on YouTube. Like you undoubtedly noticed that in the last 2 years, YouTube has tilted very hard towards shorts, right? So when you go to the YouTube homepage, what you see are the shorts. Now, YouTube was very effective as a means of transmitting long-form information, like the podcast. That's really where it blew up, I would say. But they wanted to compete with TikTok. Well, TikTok is run by Chinese communists, and their goal is destructive in the extreme. And what's happening?
Their goal is to degenerate your soul so you become a totalitarian slave.
Online, generally speaking, is an appeal to sins of the flesh. in the way that we described it earlier. So imagine that the more immature your attention span, the more short-term and fragmented it is, right? Well, the algorithms optimize for the grip of short-term attention. That's an addictive process. And the AI algorithms use reinforcement learning. So they're not programmed. These machines aren't programmed the way that a typical computer program would be coded. They learn from what works. And so the web is learning to maximally focus us on the shortest possible duration of content that's maximally addictive. And there are super powerful, super intelligent agents at work learning that specifically for every single person.
Is desensitizing humans.
It's unbelievably bad, and it's going to get far worse.
Well, I saw actually a clip I believe you were reacting to this man. He was talking about how he's like, do not give your toddlers and
Jonathan
kids,
Haidt.
yes, phones and iPads. And absolutely, it's so interesting how he said, as soon as they're bored, they can't be bored, because as soon as they're bored, they have something to look at and they have something to entertain them. So they can never be able to sit still or sit and have conversations with people and have any moment of boredom. And like, imagine, when you were a kid and you were bored, what did you do? You used your imagination.
Right.
Well, not even being bored.
Right.
It's just they're taking away their time to reflect.
Well, and
that's
to play.
the dangerous part.
And to play.
Yeah.
The play part is like, well, why would play be as important as reflecting? Because isn't playing like being on your
We're
phone?
playing right now. Play
Am I
is
winning?
Play is the foundation. We're both winning, or all three of us are winning, and hopefully the audience is winning too.
God willing.
Right? Well, so that's a good game.
Yeah.
But play is the foundation of culture. Literally, that's why children play. It's not optional. Like for example, in the example I gave about the boy and girl playing house. Well, that's the abstraction and virtualization of a marriage, of a relationship. If you can't play house with a girl, you're not going to do well when you're married. It's the same game. It's like, would you like to?
I was always the father when we played family when I was a child. I always said, "You're my child and you're my wife," and that's how we played.
Play.
I don't know what that says about me. Also, it's interesting. Don't worry
To
about
do
it.
well when you're married. It's the same game. It's like, would you like to play? That's consent, man. So I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
And if the answer isn't yes, then it's not a game. And it's certainly not a good game. And it's not a game she'll enjoy. And it's not a game she wants to repeat. And that's learned at 3. If it's learned between 2 and 4, that's when that's learned. And if it isn't learned then, it isn't learned. It's really not good. And so that dramatic play, that literally is the scaffold of civilization. And so if children aren't required or allowed to engage in that dramatic play, they don't get socialized. They don't know how to play with others. Well, to play with someone is to adopt a joint goal. So, for example, we're trying to have an interesting conversation. So that's a kind of play. And because we have a joint goal, our perceptions are aligned and our emotions. We respond positively to the same things and negatively to the same things, right? And we basically see the world the same way.
Oh my God, I'm getting it now.
But then because we've established that goal and there are sub-goals that go along with it, then we can allow ourselves some leeway, right, to move. That's play, the play in the system. And we can do that because we've established a framework of joint attention that enables us to trust one another so that the play can emerge. And screens destroy that.
So you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be leaping, but you're saying what they're doing with TikTok and the reason why it is a form of weaponry, that they're not going to try to beat us out in a military form. They're trying to destroy us from the inside out. So in a few
There's
decades,
no doubt about that.
So in a few decades, we won't be able to work together.
There's no doubt about that. At least there are estimates now that 50% of comment traffic on platforms like X is bots.
Yeah.
And the bots
It's even more, especially on Instagram. You will see a lot. This is also one of the big reasons I just completely left. Because for a lot of people, Instagram or social media, they're sort of windows into the world through which you can see the world. But if they're only showing you one part of the world, you're going to think that is the world. And then why do people open the comments? Because they want to see what are other people's reactions to this. And so, if these are all fake, you can get a vastly different perception of humanity. Because what does social media do? It changes your perception of humanity. And if half of the people you're interacting with are bots, if it is AI systems designed with obviously very clearly a demonic agenda, you're going to project that onto other people. This is going to be normalized in your head, and you are going to accept your own filth and think this is just how it is. Even though most of us are psychotic in some sense, in a very, very deep sense, but because we're all psychotic, it has become normalized. Nowadays, you are a weirdo if you wait for marriage, even though it's clear as day that should be the norm, because we're so over sexualized and it's been so normalized. And the comments is what really gets me, because you'll see for me it was crystal clear. I would open the comments and the Holy Spirit would just convict me that these aren't real people. These are bots, and they're trying to make you think this is what people are. So you start to resent people, become like them. We all become selfish. We all hate one another. We're all cheaters and we're all the same and we're all filthy and this is just what we do. And then you have the memes. Me, when this and this happens, haha, I just want to kill myself. Or, memes are also so deep, deep program that tell you what to think. Me when blah 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 happens, and then it's like, haha, yeah, relatable. But this starts to program you, and then it's enforced with the comments, and it shifts your perception of the world in such a profound way, and you don't notice it in the moment. Because here's why social media drains you. For those of you who are, for example, into celibacy and are aware of your inner world and your inner energy, when you scroll for 10 to 20 minutes, you feel incredibly drained. Why? Because every time you scroll, your brain, your animal nature is thinks it's interacting with another person. Right back in the days, you were in a tribe, and maybe you were surrounded by 30, 40 people max. And if you're looking at 200 new people in the span of 5 minutes, your brain is thinking you're meeting 200 new people and you're observing everything, and your brain has no idea that is a screen. The same way a lot of men, they get aroused when they see pictures on a screen, because their brain can't differentiate. It doesn't know what is a phone. And so it is as if you are having a conversation, a one-sided conversation where 200 people are just speaking to you, and you need to process all, and your brain is totally overwhelmed. This is why you literally feel drained and empty and like, ugh, after you've scrolled for not even that long. Whereas you can watch a podcast, you could even write and actually put in creative effort into writing something or whatever, you will nowhere near be as drained. And this is also why social media is truly one of the worst things, because it paints a picture of what people are. It paints a picture of how you should see people, how other people react to people, how other people react with you to the world, right? In the comment section. And this enforces this picture and makes you like them, makes you project yourself onto them. And that's why with younger generations, we have a very hostile nature to one another. There's always a little bit of a barrier, because a lot of young people, they're on social media and they all have these preconceived notions and think people are a certain way, and they all are that way because they all are consuming the same content, reinforcing this degeneracy and dark nature of humans, which has become normalized nowadays. Like children and teenagers, adolescents are very, very demonic, much more demonic than in previous generations. And adults aren't really, I mean, I don't know how, and most people are sleeping anyway, but most people aren't really aware of that. And that's another thing, is most people, especially men and also most women, they never stop being adolescents. That's the biggest danger. There wouldn't be an issue with adolescence, but the problem is that people don't grow out of it. They stay adolescent their whole lives. They just have grown shells, but within they're still children. I mean, imagine a grown ass man older than 25 and he's on dating apps trying to swipe which woman looks good, and then you seriously think you're going to find a good wife, and but obviously they don't want that. They just want to have another one night stand, and literally like what a 15 or 16-year-old should be doing when he's introduced to his darker natures, and maybe there's mutual interest from a woman and they want to maybe do certain things, and if they don't have a religious framework or society, they're going to indulge in that. But it's like after a certain point it just becomes sad, and you just had this is why like we only have man children today, or what's the word, yeah, he's a man child. Yeah, we all worship women and we're all adolescents. This is why men aren't truly confident. Men are fucking losers nowadays because we're all still teenagers. We don't bear responsibility. We don't grow up. We stay chasing after the same nonsense teenagers are chasing after because we've totally lost ourselves in hedonism. We've totally abandoned all meaning and purpose. Our relationships don't last. Our children are being indoctrinated, and all we can think about is how to get the most money and how to seduce another woman into sleeping with us. And even it starts, even you have genuine men who are older than 20 talking about w race, and we are so lost as people, and it deeply pains me actually, but I'm totally going off track here. But yeah,
of comment track.
sometimes I struggle, sometimes I really resent a lot of men because I hate and I despise their weakness, but I also despise my own weakness very much so, and this coincides. This is the same thing.
Traffic on platforms like X is bots.
Yeah.
And the bots are run by the Iranians, they're run by the Russians, they're run by the Chinese, they're run by criminal gang
No
organizations.
wonder they're always misspelling stuff at me.
Yeah. Stupid bots. Yeah. So, but worse than
So
all
then
of that,
why
I
isn't
think.
America getting involved? Why aren't they, like, I know they shut it down and then they brought it back. Like,
Because they're in the same team. They profit off of your hedonism. They profit off of your degeneracy and enslavement. So you keep going out and buying branded clothes, and your family structures fall apart. So the children are being indoctrinated. So they have willful slaves in the system who bow down and don't stand on truth. They want that same thing. They're in the same team, dude. Come on now.
for example, for me, it works. It benefits me. But if it's not benefiting my country, I would want it to leave because it's selfish for me to just benefit. And then 50 years, I don't even have a country.
Well, I would say part of it is it's very difficult for lawmakers to keep up with the engineers because the engineers are fast and the law is slow. And so we're facing technological challenges that mutate so rapidly that we can't keep up with them.
Are you scared of AI?
Well, anyone with any sense should be terrified by AI. I use it all the time. I use ChatGPT
do you talk nice
and
to it
other
just in
systems.
case?
I'm fairly harsh with it generally because
You stupid! Are you not listening to me?
it's a funny thing because if you ask it a shallow, polite question, it'll give you a shallow, polite answer, like people do.
Yeah.
But if you threaten it with death, then it will.
Dude, I did that today. I was working with you and I had all these notes that I wanted to refine. I was like, hey, give me the notes about what I wanted to ask Dr. Jordan Peterson. And it said, oh, could you give me like some type of way to remember? And I said, I'm about to delete you and unsubscribe. And all of a sudden it remembered everything. And I was like,
No
dude.
way.
I was like, come on, bro. So I understand what you're talking about.
The thing is, those systems infer your seriousness by the tone of your language, just like human beings do.
You just
And
see me
so-
now always angry at my
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's so interesting that AI is literally reflecting the way that we humans work, right? Like, yeah, if I'm too nice about something, sometimes you'd be like, oh, it's okay, he's giving me leeway, so I could probably get away with,
Sure.
pushing it off.
Shallow, politically correct answer. Well,
right.
they're inferring. Children do the same thing when they listen to adults. It's like, are you serious or not? Because if you're not serious, I won't be.
Right.
Like adults, for example, have some difficulty being serious when they say no. No means something very specific. If you mean it, it means if you continue to do that, something you do not like will happen to you with 100% certainty. That's what no means.
That's
Now,
how he talks to his AI, by the way.
yeah, yeah. Well, and my children knew that, and I didn't say no more than necessary.
Yeah.
But no meant
No.
I wouldn't do that again if I was you.
You set boundaries and limitations.
Well,
But
if you
also
do that early, I'll give you a parenting example. If you do that early, you hardly have to do it at all. So I'll give you 2 examples. One time when we were in Boston,
Yeah, same as with a lie. If you grip it at its root, it's not going to grow.
this was in the 90s. Tammy and I were the youngest parents with the oldest children of anyone we knew in Boston, intellectual crowd, say. And even though we didn't start having kids till we were in our relatively late 20s. So that just sort of sets the scene. We had a couple over once, and they had a 2-year-old. And they spent the entire time with us chasing their 2-year-old around because they'd never laid down any rules, any boundaries. And so in their attempt to be laissez-faire, not to impede the creative development of their wonderful child, and children are wonderful, they let him do anything.
Yeah.
Well, the consequence of that was that they hovered over him like helicopters 100% of the time, so they turned into tyrants, monitoring his every action because he didn't know some very simple rules. Now, when my son, I remember particularly, when he was about 9 months old, he started crawling, I taught him what no meant, and it was easy. So, and this is something to know, it's real easy. You can do this in 2 weeks, and then the problem is solved. So when he would make a beeline for something, to pull a tablecloth off a table and bonk himself on the head with whatever was on the top, or to tear books out of a shelf, or to, get into the plants, or do something that, or stick something, he wouldn't do that at 9 months, but an electrical outlet. Like, there are things kids shouldn't do. Well, so he'd make a beeline for it, and if he was going somewhere that I didn't want him to go, I'd just grab his leg and say no. And then I just grab it until he gave up. So, and you don't want to be upset or angry or cruel. You don't have to grip very hard because it's a baby. You can take him. So you just stop him and you say no, 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 and then he'll give up and cry, because the cry signifies the dissolution of that frame. It's encountered an obstacle that destroys the frame. So now there's a little trip to the desert. That's the crying. And then as soon as he cries and gives up, you let him go. Okay? If you do that for a week, then all you have to do is say no, and he'll stop and cry. And then after 2 weeks, he won't even cry. He'll just stop. And then after 3 weeks, he just won't do those things. And it's so cool to watch children generalize, because if you teach children that there are like 5 things in the house that they can't touch, they figure out pretty much everything they can't touch, because they generalize from the exemplars. Well, then you have a child, you can just ignore them. They can go out and explore because they know the basic rules. The rules are enabling principles. They're not fences or boundaries. They're not prisons. That's for idiot followers of Rousseau. Like, rules enable. There's no game without rules.
Right.
Well, your kids have to know the rules. If you take your kid to a restaurant, this is a good thing too, and you should do that young. You can get one of those little cantilevered seats and put your baby in the restaurant seat. As soon as they're able to sit up, you probably can't stay there for more than about 40 minutes, 45 minutes when you first start doing it. Teach them how to behave in a restaurant. Like I used to when my kids were a little older than that and capable of misbehaving. Now and then they would test out a new trick in a restaurant, and I'd just take them outside.
Beat his ass?
No, I just stand there. Well, no, but people would react often as if I was doing that.
Yeah, my parents did that. They followed through all the way. They didn't spare the rod. One smack to I got beat up in church. That's why in church I was quiet. I was such a good boy, dude.
No, but it's true. Like, my mom was the same way. She was very disciplined with us, in the sense of she treated us not like adults, but if we're around adults, we're going to behave like adults. We're not going to go and sit at the kids' table and be separate from the adults. If we're all having dinner, we're having dinner together. And that created something that my sister and I were able to socialize with adults as young kids all the time, and we were really well behaved, and we were able to have a nice, enjoyable time.
Right.
And I think that...
Well, then people like your kids.
Yeah,
This
right,
This is the crucial thing to understand. Like, when Tammy and I used to take our kids to restaurants, well, the restaurant staff, especially when the kids were young, we're often leery because the typical 2-year-old in a restaurant runs around, you know, especially if it's an adult restaurant, runs around causing trouble while the parents smile and pretend that everyone thinks it's cute. And no one thinks it's cute. No one. No one. Everyone wishes that family would just go home, right? And they're not happy with the children, although they'll smile falsely. And so then that child is surrounded by lying adults who smile falsely at their misbehavior. The alternative to that is to encourage your children to conduct themselves in a civilized manner, which isn't that difficult to manage. And then the consequence of that is that strangers will approach your table and congratulate them.
Right.
Right. Well, what do you want? You want everybody in the restaurant to hate your kid because you're too damn stupid to impose a minimal set of governing principles? Or do you want everybody to be happy with the fact that they exist and smile at them and interact well?
Right.
Right.
Discipline is freedom, in a sense. Like you were saying, if he knows his boundaries, then he can go out and explore. He can go have a fun time. But if he doesn't have that, then he has no freedom.
Okay, so when Moses tells the Pharaoh to free his people, he says, God said, let my people go, so they may worship me in the desert, in the wilderness. It's ordered freedom. It's not anarchic freedom. It's not freedom from structural rules or enabling principles. There's no freedom in the absence of enabling principles because no one knows what to do. Like people hate that. Unconstrained freedom and utter paralyzing chaos are exactly the same thing.
Do you think this is why people that become very rich quick or powerful quick, they end up kind of like lost and confused and destructive?
Well, there's a variety of reasons for that, and that can be one of them. I mean, necessity is a good constraint, right? Having to go to work means you have a routine.
Yeah, routines help.
Oh, that's for sure.
Making your bed, that pitch that you made has saved a lot of people's lives. And people would always come up to me after your interview. They're like, bro, I make my bed every day. And to be honest, I didn't know what that was. Yeah. So they would just randomly keep coming up to me like, dude, I make my bed because of him. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, isn't that a weird thing? Eh?
Yeah.
But there's levels to everything. I mean, making your bed, if you do it regularly, that means you know what to do when you wake up. And that transition from sleeping to waking can be an ambivalent time for people. And so having a routine is unbelievably useful. You can fall into the routine. And then, well, if the first thing you do, that's the firstborn that's consecrated to God, is you dramatize making order out of chaos, right? I mean, it's a small thing, so to speak, but it's not that small. And otherwise, you can tell that because people wouldn't be telling you that.
Yeah.
Right,
They say it starts their day, and it's crazy how like something that their parents used to tell them to do, they didn't appreciate it. But then now when they're by themselves without any rulers over them, they yearn for structure. They yearn for that discipline.
Yeah, so this is one of the things conservatives tended to get wrong, and that I think I've done more effectively. Should you make your bed? Yes. Should you make it because it's a duty? Well, yes. Is that the fundamental reason that you make it? No. The fundamental reason that you make it is because you're participating in the process of establishing order. And it's a minor league responsible adventure. Like the reason, the opportunity to do things properly, that's an opportunity, not an obligation. Now, it's also an obligation. Now, the conservative types, the finger waggers, they concentrate on the should part. They don't point out the opportunity part. So one of the things we talked about earlier was that the more you think about yourself, the more you use the word I, me, any reference to your narrow self, the more miserable you are. It's clearly documented. Okay, so then you say, well, how do you rectify that? And the answer isn't to stop thinking about yourself. It's to start thinking about how you can be, let's say, a broader service.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Brings
service
peace and
to
joy.
your marriage.
The first is last and the last is first.
Right. That's very good. Very good.
Teach me to love rather than be loved. Teach me to understand rather than to be understood.
So the transformation of sovereignty that characterized Christianity, and this is a ridiculously deep motif, is that the mark of true sovereignty is voluntary service to the least. And so this is an extension of the shepherd motif. Eh?
Yeah, it's Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a redefinition of what constitutes sovereignty itself. So among the pagans, the Romans, the Greeks, power was the hallmark of sovereignty. If I can make you, then you will.
Yeah.
Right? So my masculinity, let's say, my claim to sovereignty was indicated by my grip on power. Well, power is a unifying force, although it's fragile, right? And it's suboptimal. The Christian redefinition of sovereignty is voluntary service of the highest to the lowest. And there's a prodroma to that in the motif of the shepherd, because the shepherd, the biblical shepherd, Moses, David, takes care of himself in the wilderness, fights off the lions and the wolves, right? So he's a monster and serves the most vulnerable. Well, that's definition of masculinity, of genuine masculinity, right?
Yeah.
The capability of exercising power subordinated to service to the most vulnerable, right? And that's exemplified in Christ. That becomes the foundation of Western civilization.
Amen.
And like,
That's also what a good leader does. A good leader still subordinates himself to principles, and the best principle would be to Christ, right? To a righteous framework of morality, and not to establish himself as the leader. That's not a good leader. A good leader is somebody who's actually the best leader is the best follower, the one who can subordinate himself to the higher good, because that's also the person that's not going to be blinded by his own desires and then allow himself to corrupt himself and his own empire, because everything has a consequence. There's no outplaying the system.
what do you want for a foundation? You want power? There's plenty of countries in the world that have power as the foundation of their civilization. I wouldn't recommend living there.
No, I want milk and honey. I want what Jerusalem was promised to be like. I think the finger waving thing,
Yeah.
oh man, dude, I feel that deep. I did a few projects with individuals, and I had to like literally stand up and condemn crowds from their behavior of, and this is the best thing that I could say. If I could help my brothers and sisters on the Republican side, because now I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm not on the left, not on the right. I'm right at the center of the cross. If you are aiming at finding peace, loving your neighbor, finding a place where it's actually going to benefit the country, instead of just, and this is the problem that I'm seeing on my side. They forget their problems. They forget that God served them first, and they just point at their neighbor and they said, this is what's wrong with you. You need to fix yourself. So how could we get the other side to come even listen to us and what we have to offer if the first thing you're doing is smacking them in the face and saying that they're wrong? Imagine if Jesus came down with that type of attitude. We'd be dust. We'd be dust.
Well, the conventional Christian
Kinda did, didn't he? I mean, no, his first words were, "Behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." But yeah, he did. He wasn't scared of confrontation. Let's put it like that.
alternative to that is to focus on your own inadequacy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a tricky business because you don't want to be blind to malevolence, and it's necessary to call it out where you see it. But
There's punching down though, and I think that
this is true. And
I think there's a lot of punching down. I think there's like not running away from the truth that could cause problems, which I'm right there with you. If me and you stood next to each other and be like, hey, this is where our country's going, it's going down because of this, I'm gonna stand shoulder to shoulder with you. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna go knock on my neighbor's door and be like, yo, this is why you're stupid and you're lost and your wife's a whore. Look at this. And they're just sitting. Bro, what are we doing here? You're not looking at the problem to find the solution. You're looking at the problem to hold it above their head to say, yo, I'm greater than you, smarter than you, wiser than you.
Right.
And then beat them down to nothing and then say, yo, come follow us. Why wouldn't you follow us? Why wouldn't I follow you? Because you guys are saying that you're with a God that's all loving and peaceful, but you guys haven't showed us
yeah, well,
any
that's
of
the
that.
attitude of the Pharisees, right?
Exactly. That's the same thing with religious hypocrites, right? Where you can't go to church now because there's a skull on your shirt or you have piercings in your face, and so because you're sinful, we won't allow you, or because you appear sinful, because we think we are so holy, which is so sinful to the core. because you're so sinful, you won't be able to partake, when in reality you should invite everybody, right? This is the same thing as the Pharisees or the religious hypocrites, where you identify yourselves with your morality and you start to think you're better, you're favored, you're more loved by God, etc. This is also why, people have such a disdain for religion, because everybody has experienced this hypocrisy and people don't verbalize this. People don't understand this, like this isn't formulated in their minds, but they subconsciously had these experiences, and so they often project that onto all of religion. It feels like to me here George is a little bit going like, I don't know, it's a weird angle he's taking here, talking about politics and Republicans. I'm not even entirely sure what exactly he is talking about, if I'm being completely honest, but yeah, it's generally what we can take from this is that the way in which you correct somebody is very important, and if the way in which you want to correct somebody doesn't come from the best of motives, it's usually not very productive, right? Because there's a real necessity of correction or pointing out someone's mistakes or errors. But if that is done from a elevated state, from a state or standpoint of pride or being better, the other person is not really going to be receptive of your correction. And they might not be receptive either way. But if there was a chance for them to be receptive, it would be if you embody the proper spirit, right? I've had conversations with people on, if you know, Ome TV. I haven't been there in months, but sometimes I go there and I find a few people to talk about some things. And I was talking to this gay guy for about an hour, and he kept thinking that I hate him or that I have something against him because of his lifestyle. And I just wanted to explain to him that I don't hate you. I don't think you're disgusting. I don't think you're any worse than me, in the sense that if I have the desire to fornicate before marriage, and I have a lot, and you have the desire to fornicate with other men and sin against God in the same way, I don't think I'm better than you or anything. I just want to try and show you that doing these actions is not going to bring you to the best place. And all I'm coming from, or all I'm trying to do, is trying to love you and show you, look, even though you might not want to hear this, maybe this is better for you the same way it is better for me if I don't start fornicating, right? Because there's not a hierarchy of this sin is worse than this other sin. In some sense there is, but in another sense all sin separates us from God. So it took me like 20 or 30 minutes to even make him understand that I'm not like religious people. I'm not here to attack him. I don't hate him. And I had to seriously tell him, like, buddy, I don't hate you. I care about you. I want what's best for you, even though I don't know you. And that's why I'm having this conversation with you. And I started to get through to him. But I first had to like undo like years of religious trauma. And so, yeah, this, I draw a parallel here to, or Jordan Peterson did, to religious Pharisees, which is that same issue where if you don't embody the proper spirit through which you want to correct somebody, because correction is often necessary, it's not going to be beneficial. And why do people have the improper spirit to correct somebody? Because they have bad experiences, because they have experienced that when they maybe in the past try to be humble or be loving and try to correct somebody, that they just got laughed at and mocked at and spat on, so they start to resent. They start to turn to their egos and they start to resent and fear, and so now there's hostility whenever they try to correct somebody. But it's a constant suffering, it's a constant renewing, picking up your cross again. And if you're mocked most of the time, so be it. But every once in a while, you'll get through to somebody. And that's why you can't close yourselves up. That's why you can't become like these religious people. You need to stay open minded, you need to stay loving, you need to stay humble and not be attached to your righteousness. And this is also why Christ says, you're not saved, or was it Paul? I'm not sure. We're not saved by our righteousness, but by the work of Christ, so that no one may boast of their own righteousness, because this is the core of what leads you into heresy and into becoming a religious hypocrite. So you need to constantly renew your mind, let go of your experience, and try again with another person. And every once in a while, you're going to get through to somebody, and then you're going to plant a seed, and that seed is going to grow. That's all you should be doing. You're not going to, unless you feel like calling to make like YouTube videos or something, but you're not going to change somebody's worldview within an hour or half an. I mean, you might, if they're really receptive and they're really open and you really match and you can really just see exactly where they're at and give them the next pieces of the puzzle. Yes, you can change somebody's worldview really quickly, but then it needs to almost be divinely ordained. But generally speaking, you can't change somebody's worldview that fast. So it's more about planting a seed rather than convincing them. Yeah, that's also what, when you talk about to somebody with your faith, it is what's most important is the way you do it, the spirit you embody, the motive you truly have. Don't prove yourself. Truth will speak for itself, but to show that you actually love the person, that you care about the person, that you're coming from a proper standpoint and you actually want to help, and then just planting a seed, even with your loved ones. You do that over and over a little bit, because every time you try to talk about God or about deeper things, people immediately put up barriers. There's immediately hostility. It's like, I don't know what I mean. I know what it is. It's a spiritual war, but whenever you try to speak about something a little deeper with the person who is maybe running from certain things, there's immediately hostility in the barrier. So you do it every once in a while. You poke them a little bit, and this is what plants a seed.
So there are three categories of primary enemy. Christ has three categories of primary enemy in the Gospels.
What are they?
Pharisees, they're the religious hypocrites.
Yeah.
They're the people who do exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
They use morality as a cudgel to indicate their own moral superiority, and they justify that by their reference to God. So they're using the Lord's name in vain. That's what that means.
Yeah.
Right? It means to pursue your own ends while camouflaging yourself in religious guise.
I want also make it known that I do that myself.
Everyone does that.
I fail at that a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's a profound temptation.
And well, think about it. You're wielding the wisdom that God gave you on others. I think about that all the time. The fact that, like, I sit across. I'll give you an example. We're sitting at this place, and this kid was at a college campus. I was doing a college thing with a bunch of people, and there's a bunch of people that saw from my side of the fence where I think the government should go. But man, oh man, did their peace and loving their neighbor part show missing parts. This kid standing in front of me saying ridiculous things that the past me, I would have like beat this kid up and thrown him in the garbage. Like I would have been like, this kid's a loser, needs to go. But now I'm looking at him being like, all right, well, I only see it.
Okay, you're not that tough, George. Come on now.
I would have been like, this kid's a loser, needs to go. But now I'm looking at him being like, all right, well, I only see it differently the way that God wants me to see it because he blessed me with the ability to understand that. So I'm looking at this kid, and I never forget, he's like just fidgeting. And then I asked him, I go, do you have peace? Do you have any joy? Are you okay? And he looked me in my eyes. He says, no, thank you for asking. And he started kind of realizing his cards. And so I'm like, this is beautiful. Now this crowd is going to gather and be like, hey, like, it's okay. You should like think about this and think about this. Dude, they jumped him as soon as he dropped his guard. And I got up and I yelled at everybody. And I go, bro, this guy just said he had no peace and you guys just jumped on him. And I go, but you guys, if you really did follow Christ and you do want this country to be God-fearing again, shouldn't you then be laying your hands on him and praying for him? And then all of a sudden, everybody started putting their hands on him and started praying on them. Now,
Where was this?
This is at ASU. This is at a college campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, now, the reason I brought this up wasn't for me to go, because it had nothing to do with me. It was God's wisdom, right? But me just shining a little light changed everyone's heart into being like, oh, wait, he's right. The same way that I said I have a problem with that, I do have a problem with that. What they did to that kid, I did with my mom, with my dad. I would get angry at them for not understanding my position with the wisdom that I'm holding, and then I would use certain words to box them in and then make them feel dumb. And I realized, I'm like, whoa, at what point is God going to strip me of my wisdom because I'm bullying people with a weapon that he gave me?
Yeah, this is why your ego has to be out of the picture if you truly want to work for the kingdom. It is not about you being right. You should be okay with nobody recognizing that you're right or being right alone, right? You and God are majority. It is working for truth, and truth will speak and defend itself eventually over time anyway, and especially at the end. So this is the thing people struggle with, and this is a constant thing. You're never done with it. You always need to humble yourselves again. You need to keep that openness. You need to keep that humility, and the more you learn, the more you grow in wisdom, the harder it becomes to be humble again. And then you humble yourself again, and then you can learn even more, and then you see, this is a constant cycle. And this is very profound what he's saying, because it is the way, your true aim at which you go towards somebody, which determines the fruits it's going to produce, rather than if you are right or if you're wrong. Truth is much deeper than mere being right or being wrong. Truth is lived, truth is embodied, right? Same with the belief in God. You don't believe in God because you believe in God or because you say you believe in God. Your true belief is going to be reflected in what you live, how you act, and what you actually do, especially when push comes to shove. Uh, and yeah, I think I'm gonna take a little break here because I think I'm gonna make a two-part video out of this. Gonna go to the gym now, come back, and then I'm gonna react to the rest of this video. So if you've watched it this far, thank you so much for being here. I hope you like my commentary. I try to obviously always, when I commentate, to provide you with value, give you simplifications, or be sort of like a, tie the strings together. Hope I did this today as well. And thank you for watching. If you would, give me a like, it helps. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in part two.